In this video, let's talk about aviation and your experience with flying.
Okay, why don't we talk about my experiences with aviation and flying?
Okay.
I was about 10, 11 years old and on by Argyle, and one Sunday afternoon they were giving rides for 50 cents a ride. And it might as well have been $50 because we didn't have any money. But that day I decided someday I am going to fly. If I can just go up and come back, but someday I will fly.
What kind of plane were they giving rides in?
I don't know, probably a Piper Cub or an Aeronica Champ or Chief or something like that.
And about what year was that?
In the mid-30s, mid to late 30s, I would say, yes. And I waited.
During the war, did you see like any kind of transport or Army, Air Force planes go
Oh yes,
over?
lots of them. Even gliders. They had twin engine planes pulling gliders, 2 at a time. Yes, we saw a lot of them. And then I waited until I was 40 years old and farming, and I started taking flying lessons. And it took me quite a while because I didn't have time to go to classes. So I bought a $5 book and studied the rules, and I got my written on the first attempt, and I got my private pilot's license. And I used to fly around a little. The biggest thrill was when I had my pilot's license, I took Wanda and Nancy to Madison Truax for dinner. That was a big deal for me.
And what kind of planes would you fly in? You rented one from Janesville.
I rented them, yeah. Oh, they were Cessnas and Pipers and Grumman Americans and a few different ones, the Beach Musketeer, different ones, but they were all tricycle gear. I never got a tail dragger endorsement. It was a tricycles, single engine. Yes.
And then when did you start taking glider lessons?
At age 50, I thought I have to do something a little different, so I took glider lessons up at Albion at Tobacco City Airport. I went up there and took the lessons there from a fellow by the name of Jake something, Swiss name. And then I had to go to West Bend for the federal rating, for the federal man, but I got a license to carry passengers in a glider. So I understand the basics of flight, and I appreciate people that are good at it. Yes.
And what other kinds of aircraft have you personally flown? You're in an ultralight? Did you fly an ultralight?
Yeah, I've been on ultralights, yes. You didn't have to have a license for that. But I'm just in the novice class, I realize that. But to me, it's very interesting, and I know what makes them fly, and I know how to stay out of trouble. Yes, I do.
And as a passenger, you've been in a lot of different kinds of aircraft.
Oh yes, I've been in lots of them, all the way from Piper Cubs to the Concorde.
Yeah, tell us how you happened to have a ride in the Concorde.
Well, years ago I had a tug-of-war team, fellas and girls, and they knew I was interested in aviation. And Concorde, the supersonic Concorde, was going to come to Oshkosh at the big air show at Oshkosh every year, and it was going to give rides. And one time after practice, or at practice, they wanted to know, did I know how to get a ticket for a ride on the Concorde? They had somebody that wanted a ride, but they didn't know how to get the ticket. And I says, well, I'll get the information to you by tomorrow noon. So I looked it up and I wrote it all down, and then I give it to them. And the following practice night, they gave me an envelope with a ticket for me to ride in the Concorde. 40 fellas and girls, each ponied up $10 so I could ride. And I was deeply touched by that. Yes. And it wasn't the ride in the Concorde that mattered. It was what these young folks would do for me.
And what did the ride consist of?
The ride just consisted of taking off and going up, flying up past Green Bay and back. They did not go supersonic. They didn't dare overland. They just went supersonic over the ocean. But they're all in museums now or in the junkyards. It never paid. But when they were over the ocean and going at Mach 2, that's twice the speed of sound, it was going about the same speed as a .22 rifle bullet. And that created so much friction that whole structure of that Concorde airplane stretched up to 12 inches. And I find that fascinating.
And you explained this in an earlier video, but maybe tell us again about the Spruce Goose and the 2 times you saw it.
Oh, the Spruce Goose, that's Howard Hughes's plane. During the war, World War II, metal was scarce, so he decided he was going to build a plane mostly out of wood. And it was made out of birch, the spruce, there was no spruce in it. That's just a moniker that the press put on it. But the largest aircraft ever built. It had a wingspan of 319 feet 11 inches. And when he finally got it built, and it had 6 engines, 6 or 8 engines, yeah, I think 8. 8 engines, each one 3,000 horse. It was designed to haul 720 troops. When he had it built, the war was over. They did not need it. The arrangement had been made previously that he fund about half of it, 8 or 9 million, and the U.S. government would fund the other half if the plane flew. They didn't need it anymore, but one time in December or November 1947, he took it out in the harbor and taxied down and took off, went up 100, 200 feet and flew a mile or so and set it down, and he said, it flew, now pay up, and the government had to pay. And then it sat there in the hangar for a long time, and then I think Disney Corporation bought it. They had it as a tourist attraction, and they did some renovation on it, I guess for cosmetics, but it didn't do it any good. And then years later, they took it apart, put it on barges, and hauled it up to Portland, Oregon area on barges. Then they took it out, put it together, and when they had it all put together, positioned as they wanted it, then they built a hangar around it. So it's a very nice museum. But when I first saw it the first time in 1949, it was in St. Peter Harbor, and I didn't get to look at it close because it was restricted. But we did take a harbor cruise, and we could look at it from the ocean side and look into the harbor there, into the hangar. I did not see it again until several years ago. Nancy and I were in Portland, Oregon area, and it's in a little museum south, I think it's southwest of Portland. McMinnville, I think is the name of the town. And we got to sit in it and put our hands on the controls of the 8 throttles. And it was quite a thrill to me. Yes.
And you've been in hot air balloon?
I've been in hot air balloons, yes.
Helicopter?
Helicopters, yes, yes.
Parasailing?
Yes, parasailing.
And more recently, a couple years ago, in a Dreamliner.
Yes, yes. And I've enjoyed it all. I've enjoyed it all. Yes, I did.